Just welcome everybody to tonight's virtual Riverside talk. It's going to be with Felix Muhlebach, and he's going to be here. He's discussing get wet, relax, sorry, and row fast. Here we go. How to transition a big boats master club into a singles club and make rowers happy and fast in the process. Before we get into introductions, just a little bit about the upcoming chats. I want to give a shout out for next Wednesday, the 18th. We're going to have Coach Neil Bergenroth to discuss understanding force curves to improve. The following Tuesday, we've got Greg Saborin, who is a North Bay Rowing Club member and founder, and he's going to talk about the history of and efforts to build a community boathouse. On Tuesday, December 8th, we're going to have U.S. National Team coxswain Colette Lucas Conwell join us. And then following her on the following Wednesday, we'll have Kendall Chase, also a U.S. National Team member. And then Felix generously arranged and will co-host a panel discussion on rhythm from the perspective of a coach, applied sports biomechanist, and an athlete. Andrew Randall, Connie Draper, and Olivia Coffey will be joining us for that. And just feel free to contact me for more details and suggestions for possible topics and speakers for this venue. Let's see here. Again, if you want to take a moment and type in the chat where you're from and potentially what boathouse you're in, that would be wonderful for everybody else to see. And then just a few notes in terms of questions and such that come up, go ahead and put them in the chat. And if they're specifically relevant to something that Felix is discussing at the moment, I might chime in and go ahead and relay that question. Otherwise, I'll hold off and we'll get into that at the end for a Q&A discussion portion. So for introductions, I first met Felix earlier this fall during a session he presented at the U.S. Rowing Masters Virtual Camp. And what struck me about the program that he developed and implemented due to the COVID at his club was the attention he placed on what goes into feeling comfortable rowing in a single and relaxing in a boat. And he sort of unraveled this to the point that ultimately it meant what goes into getting out of fear of flipping in the boat. And I don't think this is anything new to anybody, but it was just refreshing to hear someone specifically focusing on that again. And I think Nancy's addressed that, and a few other masters coaches that I've talked to have addressed that as well. Felix's talk tonight will present the curriculum Chaos his rowing club has developed and the feedback he got from novices and experienced single rowers and the results they achieved over the last 4 months. Just a little bit about Felix. He's 60 in his midlife crisis. Some say he took the wrong turn. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Instead of the turn going to the golf course or to the Porsche dealership, he ended up in a boathouse in a learn to row class. He immediately was hooked. He's now addicted to rowing. He's a member of 4 rowing clubs, 2 in the US and 2 in Europe. And he rows more than 3,000 kilometers per year. 7 years ago, he and 6 other rowers founded Chaos Rowing, the club for rowers addicted to rowing, and it's physically located on Jordan Lake in North Carolina. He currently serves as Chaos's captain and thus faced the challenge to transform the club due to the coronavirus. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Felix Muhlebach, who will discuss Get Wet, Relax, Row Fast, how to transition a big boats master club into a singles club and make rowers happy and fast in the process. Welcome, Felix.
Thank you very much. Now let's see whether that works. Okay. So this computer isn't very fast, so okay, here we go. It always takes forever. Good. So why do you have to listen to this? We are a small club of very stubborn, self-reliant people. So when we started Chaos, we wanted to make sure that we can get as much rowing in as we can. So we didn't have a learn to row program, because we always wanted to have get as many miles in, and the members decided that they don't want to volunteer for learn to row classes. So our Harvard Road for Harry Parker member always says we are not a real club because we don't have a boathouse, we don't have a coach, and we don't have hired help. And we pride ourselves that all our club policies and club rules actually fit into the waiver. So our waiver is all the policies we have are in the waiver, if you want to look at them. We have them succinct, and one of the questions was how we address winter rules. And if you look at the waiver, it says we make people aware that rowing in winter in cold weather is dangerous. And we basically say, if your significant other, I mean the person who cares most about you, lets you row in winter, we are not in your way, because we think they care more about the rowers than most probably we do. So if they let them row, we let them row too. So being small has the disadvantage that we have high expenses for insurance and rack space and whatever, and we desperately need 20 paying members to survive. And as you know, the Corona crisis hit April fully, and our membership years begins in April, in 1st of July. So we were, of course, a bit scared that people wouldn't renew, because I mean, only the single rowers could go out, and our big boat rowers, our quad rowers, our sweep rowers, they couldn't go out. So how do you convince them to renew? So we had to convince them that rowing the single is actually fun, and get them so hooked that they actually renew. And then we thought we are not the only club out there that has this problem, because we thought every club in the US must have the same problem at the same time. So I contacted US Rowing, whether they have developed a curriculum or guidance for club in our situation, and turned out they didn't. And they asked me to put this presentation together, or this approach together, or whatever you call it. And like I always do things, it's called benchmarking, and it's basically meaning steal and steal shamelessly. So nothing you see in this presentation I invented, with the exception of the chart on the last page, so you have to be patient. Everything else is taken, stolen, borrowed from other places. So when we developed this plan, we started from this Italian quiz. So I spent some time in Italy, and they had this joke: how do you recognize an American scholar on the race course? So that was the starting point. And the answer is this. So the fat guy in stroke, that's me. And you see, this is Felix 10, 12 years into his rowing career. We actually won a medal on this race here. You see us here. But you see two things. One, shoulders up at the ears, arms bent, muscles engaged. Look at these forearm muscles. Look at the grip. This person isn't relaxed. Absolutely not relaxed. Look at the head. Where does it go? But that's, you know, since I'm so strong and since I'm so tough, I could make the boat go fast, but it wasn't efficient. So I took a sabbatical 4 weeks in Italy with a famous rowing coach in Italy, and he put me in a boat. He went out with me. He came back and he said this word that is written here, principiante. If you translate it, it means bloody beginner. Because he saw that this person here cannot row, has never learned the basics, never ever learned the basics, and most importantly, never lost the fear. This person isn't relaxed, this person can't be fast. So he basically said, it's a waste of my time to coach you, go over there, start with the little kids. So I spent the first few days of my high-priced sabbatical in Italy with the 10, 12, 14-year-old Italian kids doing what I will show you today. And it's especially embarrassing if you have the whole Irish national team and the whole Australian national team watching you do it. But that's what I had to go through. So left is before Italy, right is before Italy. You see, I mean, I have more reach. I have relaxed shoulders. Oh, for my purpose, I mean, still room for improvement. It looks better, still ways to go. But the difference is playing with kids between this picture and this picture. So if you want to find out whether you are a Felix, do those tricks. Nancy, who is on the call, calls them the circus tricks. Just go out with your single and do those tricks. I mean, sit at the finish and let go of the oars. Sit at the catch, let go of one oar, let go of the other oar, and then let go of both oars. And if you can do this, you're not Felix. If you think there is no way I can sit at the catch, and we make ours actually do it with square blade, here it's with feather blade. If you can't even comprehend doing this sitting, because you know she's actually stable, and it's not just a millisecond she lifts both hands, she's actually here. If you can't imagine that, then I can assure you will never relax your shoulders and you will never row fast. So this is a picture of one of the Italian kids I had to play out with. I mean, it's Davide, my doubles partner. He's now 53 or so years old, but he learned like the Italian kids. And now look at him. This is the Americans at the catch. This is the Italian at the catch. Look where the blade is. Blade is halfway in. Look at that. Then look at his finishes. So for an American, that's the finish, but look how far he can still go. And then look how he leaves, and that's what I call the Italian mountains in the water. So he has complete pressure till he releases the blade. That's what the Italian mountain means. And that's just because he's relaxed here, gets the blade in, and can drive through the entire drive and still have pressure on the blade. And the Italians claim that you don't see an American who can leave a mountain like this. Because we are not relaxed here, we can't be good here. So when we developed this program for chaos, we said the first thing we have to make sure is that they are not afraid. We have to take them the fear. Once we have taken them the fear, we get them to relax. And once they can relax, we teach them how to row fast. And the basic thing is, if you're afraid of flipping, you focus on the wrong thing, because that's how I learned to row. So I was, learned to sweep row. One day, 9 guys showed up. One person had to go in the single, so it was my turn to go in the single. They put me in the single. They showed me, okay, this is the safety position. This is left over right. Now go. And you have 8 rowers and a good-looking coach, good-looking cocks, watching you whether the European big mouth is flipping or not. So you focus so much on not flipping that you can never relax. The shoulders are up. So if you don't flip, you cannot learn how to handle it, and you never push your nervous system to the limit. So the next step we then do is relax. And the thing there is, just imagine you have to go to a race, you have to row back into the stake boat. And if you never learn to relax, you never learn to back. If you can't back, you are so nervous when you have to get in the stake boat that your adrenaline push is already gone. Then we teach them tricks, we teach them maneuvers, and then the next thing. So that's just to get them comfortable in the boat. That's the relaxing. And then once they have learned that, then we teach them how to row fast, and then we'll spend some time on that. The get wet started with take the stigma of flipping, and then teach the vital skills in a playful, hopefully fun way. So it started with, and that's how I met Jessica. It started with a preparation. So about 6 weeks before we put them in singles, we started to offer yoga for rowers. And of course, like with everything in rowing, those who need it the most didn't sign up to do it. So I thought of a way to convince them that yoga would be good for you. And I asked them to do these 2 exercises. So you sit on an exercise ball and you just, tip your pelvis backwards and forwards. And especially the guys, most of them could still do that. But then if you ask them to do the same thing sideways with the arms out, they can't. Because most guys have never learned that you can move your hip independently from your spine. But how can they set the single if they can't do this movement? Now, the few ones that actually could do the hip sideways, then you ask them to do this third thing, which I stole from the kayakers, which is absolutely challenging. So you have your feet on a small exercise ball, you sit on a big exercise ball, and you make movements with your arms. If they can't do that, they should do yoga, because you work on balance, you work on the core engagements that you actually can sit in this position, and you learn to do with your arms different things than with the rest of your body. Now, if this is a kayaker, but if he were a rower, he would have nice strokes because he would have nice finishes and a good posture at the finish. Core engaged, can, balance with his hips and his legs. Fine. And that's why we started with yoga for rowers, and that's why you will, be me, the apostle of yoga, because I have been fighting it for 2 years, finally started to do it, and it really helped. So the first thing you have to teach them is how to get back into a boat if they fall out. And the most important thing, which most people don't know, is if you look at this hand position of the lady here, she has the hands relatively far apart, more than shoulder width apart, and she has a right angle with her arms. And if she is in that position, it's really, really easy to push up. It's really easy to push up. If the hands are closer together, very hard. I mean, you can try. So that's the first thing they have to understand. And then the other thing is this sideway turn when you come up. I mean, if you have a fancy, expensive boat, you now have a bow rigger. So everything you learned way back, how to get back into a boat, doesn't work anymore. So you have to be able to do this twist with your rear and sit into the boat. Otherwise, you can't get back in. So that's what you have to teach them. If they can do that, they can get back into the boat. And the advantage is that whatever boat it is, whether it has backstays, whether it's bow rigged or stern rigged, with this technique, you can always get back, always. So that's what we teach. So we entice them to do yoga. We sent them pictures of how to get back in the boat. And then, of course, we give them a curriculum to work on through the first few lessons. And Nancy for sure has shown that. There is a person in Australia who has developed this for the Australian Rowing Federation. And it's basically, how do you teach kids to scull and to lose the fear? He is now the talent identification boss for Rowing Canada. And this is now pretty much standard in the English-speaking world. If you're a member of Decent Rowing, there are also videos that demonstrate all these drills. So when they come the first day, you don't do a flip test with them. You teach them what can the boat do without you flipping. So you make them go through this list and see how far they can get before they actually flip. And for them, it's an absolute learning experience how far down that list they can actually get before they flip the first time. Now, if you do the typical, let's have a flip test today, it sends the wrong message, because what you want them to understand is, oh, this thing is actually more stable than I thought. It feels a bit tippy when I get in it, but I can do all these things. So the first thing is, let go, put the oars in one hand and then touch various points on the boat. And of course, the first really challenging one is if you have to touch the opposite oarlock. So the left oarlock with your right hand. So that's the first challenge. And all of them go through that really, really easy. Then the next thing is blades flat on the water and then start to rock the body. So they learn how safe the safety position actually is. And then you say, okay, you saw how stable it is. Now start to truss the blades, slap them, do the same thing off the water. Then double slap is then the next one. And then comes, because so far, 1 to 4 they can do with their shoulders up to their ears. Number 5, they can't. So they have to turn the hands around each other. And for that, you actually have to start to release the hands. You have to start to release the forearms, and you have to start to release the shoulders. So you do 20 of those. Then the next thing is, okay, you are relaxed. The next thing is you lower and raise the riggers. So make sure they have the thumbs at the end, and then make sure they can get the riggers down to the water. First the left, then the right, then the left, then the right. And then, of course, the next thing then goes is rigger under. So can you actually submerge the riggers under the water? And all ours got here without flipping. And you could see how their faces relaxed because they thought, oh, it's not that difficult. So, of course, the next one is stand up. And once they were able to stand up, then you asked them, can you start to rock? Can you get the riggers down to the water? And that's why it's the yellow mark. That's when the first time they flipped. So we could get everybody to here before they flipped for the first time. Now, of course, all those balancing exercises, yoga really helped, because in yoga you learn focus a point at the shoreline, balance, get the balance with your eyes, get support from your eyes, and they could get here. Okay, so they flipped for the first time. They get back in the boat, and then they do it again and again. And then, of course, the competitive spirit kicked in. And then the question is, can you rock left to right so far that the riggers go under? And not everybody got there. Quite a few actually did. But the purpose of the exercise was achieved. They were relaxed, and they learned how the boat is stable if you let it be stable. The moment you tighten up, it's not stable. The moment you relax, it is. And then you will hear me talk a lot about that. I have learned by now that if you want to see how relaxed people are, make them back. Make them a backing row backwards, 20 strokes, 30 strokes, and you will see immediately how relaxed the hands are, how relaxed the shoulders are, how much length they can actually get in the stroke. So to me, that is always a good indication how well I did we did in teaching them where they go. So these are the pictures. So this is jump in the water, try to get on the dock, hands apart. And you see this lady here, she can't do this turn. She can't get her rear onto the dock. And we had to practice a lot. And she was also having issues in the boat the first time. So then we go out, and then of course we get to standing up. And so this is the fat guy, this is me. This is, for me, that's pretty good, especially in a very narrow Philippi where you don't have place for your feet. But once they saw that the fat guy could do it, of course, then our ballroom dancer had to say, if he can do it, I can do better. So look how she is, much more relaxed, up, almost the head up. And then the CFO, of course, had to be one better. So he stood here. And then once everybody saw this, then they said, okay, now let me do this. Let me stand free, rock the riggers left to right. And he got that far. And of course, we all ended up in the water. But that was the purpose. I mean, we got out, we tried again. And a week later, they all bragged about their bruises. And I can tell you, they all had bruises from mid-thigh up basically to their neck. But they had a good time, and they confirmed that they had a good time. So that was day one. So they come off, and it was also a bonding experience. I mean, you know, they were much more better friends after this, because this is a joint experience than they were before. So in the second lesson, we started to teach them maneuvers, and we were pretty strict on those, because that's also where you establish club standards. I mean, if you take out the quad and you have 4 alpha males getting in the quad, they all have a different approach, and it's not a very pleasant experience. But here in the single, you can start from the beginning again and say, this is how you launch, this is how you get in the boat, never let go of the oars. They finally believe you, I can tell you that. So this is what we used it for. How to launch, of course, we made them shove, because if you ever want to go travel the world, row with other clubs in Germany and Italy, if you can't shove, you can't row with them, because they all shove off the dock. Shoving is standing with one leg in the boat, other leg on the dock, pushing off the dock. It's a balance exercise, and most of ours really mastered it. And then you have to teach them how to turn, the long turn, one blade after the other, the short turn, which I think you Americans call the river turn, row back and forwards at the same time. That is interesting to see who gets it and how long it takes them to get it. There are people who can do this almost immediately. It's normally in people who are more relaxed and more intuitive. And our brain power overachievers, IQ 160 people are really struggling with this one because they think it. Then again, you make them back with normal blades and backed blades. Again, it's a really good exercise. And then you teach them how to dock. So that's lesson number 2. And of course, they flip. You know, I mean, if you tell them to do this and you make it a competition, they will flip, but that was the purpose. So lesson number 3 started with this. It's something I learned from the Germans. They actually have this exercise. They put tennis balls in the water, and then they have a competition who can collect more tennis balls in the shortest period of time. So the goal is collect 3. And of course, if you flip, you have to start anew with 0. And that basically is just a test whether they understood everything you taught them here. Because they can't get to the tennis balls if they can't relax, and they can't do turns, and they can't do backwards, forwards. So, and of course, I mean, they're all competitive alpha males and females. They had a ball. I mean, they had a good time. So you took their fear, and now comes the taboo subject, especially here in the US, where you have to discuss with them about safety. And I always tell them the same story. I have a good friend, his name is Beat Ocklin. He was the one who brought the Stampfleet 24X shell to the US. He was one of those. You might have met him then. And he always said that PFDs are not for real rowers. He was absolutely convinced that real rowers don't wear PFDs. He has FISA World Masters medals through the wazoo. And one January morning, he went rowing. He flipped. They saw him wave. His body went under, and they never found him. Never, ever found him because he doesn't have any body fat. 70 years old. He went under, 400-meter deep lake. They never found him. So his family had never the opportunity to give him a formal burial. So I suggest to everybody that there were PFDs. In our club, you see most of the rowers wear one. The rule is if you pass the re-entry test, you either pass the re-entry test or wear a PFD, but we strongly encourage them to do both, because if Mahe Drysdale can row with a PFD, I mean, it's Mahe Drysdale, he has a PFD with him, nicely tucked behind his bow rigger, everybody can. You know, I mean, I'm for sure he can for sure get back in the boat, but if he does it, why can't we? Our standard is an inflatable PFD. We ordered them from Germany, and that's not because we are arrogant. It's just if you look at the difference between the American one, which is very long, it's made for hunters, and the German one, which is made for rowers, it's a little bit shorter, so it's easier to finish. So the hands at the finish just fit under the PFD. But, you know, as long they can also take the really cheap one with them in the boat. So that was it. That was number 3. Now number 4 was let's do some tricks. And again, I of course stole them from Troy Howell. That's the guy who runs Craftsbury, and from Nancy, who is on the call today, and from Charlotte Hollings. So if I were to ask you which finger squares and which finger feathers, can you answer that? Turns out that most scholars can't. And it's therefore worthwhile to watch this video from Charlotte Hollings. Somewhere in the middle, she has this one sentence where it says the pinky squares and the thumb feathers. Now, every book or so I read, including Nancy's, they focus, you know, on the thumb. Where is the thumb? Is it down thing? But that you come into the catch and you use the pinky to actually square. Charlotte Hollings was the only one I found who said that. And once you tell that people, 2 things happen. Their square ups get nicer, and they figure out that their grips are too big. Because if you really want to square, if you really want to square with your pinky, if you have your grips are too big, it doesn't work. So what we now do is we let them sit at the catch and do just the first 4 inches of the drive. So they are in at the catch, squared and berries, and then they push with their legs for 4 inches. And then they get out again and come into the next catch 4 inches again and do that back and forth. I don't know how the drill is correctly called in the US. But if you do that with feathering and squaring, I mean, you do a lot of feathering and squaring, and it practices it very well. And the club record now is 52 strokes per minute with squaring and feathering. And you do a lot of squaring and feathering. We had one lady who did 48 last Saturday morning, which was turned out to be a broken rib. So they now can do that really well. And they all, or most of them, ordered their private oars now. And it was amazing that they all, after doing this exercise a lot, they all ordered one grip size down. And the other thing is what Nancy says, look at where the thumb is. And if you go into your boat house and look at the oars of your scullers, I would bet you money that your fastest sculler, the oars are worn out. The grips on the oars are worn out down here. To me, it's one indicator on whether people are good or bad scullers is where are their oar handles worn out. So there is a webinar and there is a link to it of Tracy Howell from Craftsbury on how they teach US national team rowers how to get comfortable in the boat. And you have to read this. Sitting easy at the front end is arguably the most fundamental sculling drill there is. And so all our practices, everything, we always start here. After the first 600-700 meters of warm-up, there always is a drill that sits here at the catch. You see her, I mean, shoulders relaxed, arms extended. She balances with her hips and her feet. And once they can do that, they have perfect catches, they are relaxed, they are fast. And we are just working on that. And I have learned, I say it again, the best way to figure out where they are on the relaxed scale is to a 20-stroke backing race. You see their grip, because when you back, you have to have a relaxed grip. You see whether their wrists are flat or not. Most of them have a squirrel wrist, so they can't win the race. You see how quick they are with their blade work. You see their hand heights. They see whether they have a relaxed shoulder, and you see their stroke length. And even more important is they see each other. You know, they see, oh man, I'm slow. Look at that. She's just flying away. What is she doing differently? And the answer is she relaxes. And so when we started to do this, so this is practice number 4 or 5, all of a sudden our experienced scholars started to join in. And we did this race, and all our novices easily beat the experienced scholars, because the experienced scholars, they go out on the road, they do pieces, they do this, they have their exercise plan, but they never do backing. So they were absolutely surprised, and you saw that they couldn't relax. It was an eye-opener to me. And honestly, you know, I can't do it either, but that's why we do it. And so that was it. By now, they understand relaxing is important. So the next step is rowing fast. And that's why now all of a sudden the experienced scholars joined in, because they heard race, they heard this, they heard that. So they showed up. So the first thing is you have to make sure that they actually fit in the boat. And that's really, really important. I took out all the rigging slides because there are tons of rigging webinars online. So do one of those and make it easy for the athletes to know how to set their boat. I mean, we have shared boats. So each time they come, they have to adjust the boat for themselves, but make it a ritual to adjust the boat. Don't rush them through this. It's really important. If you're not in an adjusted boat, you can't row. And then the next thing, you have to teach them from the very beginning what is a good indicator for good rowing. And then the next thing is comprehensive feedback. And based on the feedback, develop a list of personalized drills. And then what I learned from the Italians is, you know, there is no practice, even practice number 3, where you put the novices out there on the lake for the first time, basically by themselves. Make sure there's always a race in it, always, because it keeps their fear away and focuses them on other things, and it gives them immediate feedback. It just works. I'm 100% sure. So adjust the boat. in Nancy's book and many other places, there are all those tests about flexibility and mobility. British Rowing has a study out that the most limiting factor for us masters rower is not power, it's not technique, it's flexibility and mobility. So if you put people in a rowboat, their foot stretcher is set to 42 degrees. And I can assure you, none of us masters can actually most probably row 42 degrees foot stretchers unless we do a lot of yoga. So this is the white guy. That's the picture you see in the US. That's Asia. So you can actually teach your heels to be that flexible. But, you know, you have to do tons and tons and tons and tons of down dogs in yoga. Because already this, for most of us, is an exaggeration. I mean, if you can get that far down with both feet on the ground, feet almost parallel, you're already pretty good. So that was the one thing that, you know, if people can't do this, you have to adjust the boat a different way. And then the other thing is, all the modern new boats have the seats too far down. That means they, in order to make the boat appear more stable, they lowered the seat. Now, if you measure them, if you lower from the seat to the heel caps, they are 11 centimeters, maybe 12 centimeters. But I can assure you that us old, fat, beer belly guys, we need 16.5 centimeters to even dream of coming into the catch. So we had to raise, in all our fluids for the guys, we had to raise the seats by 2 inches. Of course, makes it a bit more unstable and so on, but otherwise they couldn't, there's no way they could get into the catch. And if you buy a new Empacher, it has the same issue. Only if you buy, you know, the big bass tops, Philippes, you get 16.5. For everything else, you have to fiddle around with the seat. Now, the Wintex are generous because the Wintex come with height adjustable seats. So there you have to do less finagling. So again, that was the advertising for yoga, because we work exactly on this in every practice, this. So, so they are in a boat that is set for them. They go out, and now what do you teach them is good rowing. Of course, you know, they all have too much money. They all have speed codes. So of course they are focused on the speeds and splits. Or is it the run, or is it connectedness? So that's what the Italian teach. You know, there's basically feet out rowing from the catch to the finish. Or is it consistency? Nancy has a good chapter about that. So we, from the beginning, said our indicator is run and consistency, because the speed will follow. And the Australians always say, you know, the best rowers have the fewest bad strokes. Well, that's it. That's what Nancy calls consistencies. I mean, if you do 100 stroke and 90 of them are good, you most probably win the race. If you have 50 extraordinary good strokes and 50 bad strokes, you won't. So we stole it, of course, from her. She says 10 strokes per minute, 10 meters per stroke at conversational pressure. And then do 11 meters at stroke rate 11, 12 for 12, 13 for 13, and then 14 for 14. And she claims that you will win the Olympics when you do 14 for 14. We are not there, but we are pushing now 13 for 13. Actually, we have quite a few people who are pretty close. And that it is worthwhile to focus on run. If you listen talks with the British national team, the men, they have this test. You know, their test is not a 2K erg test. Their test is 30 minutes, capped rate at rate 20. And the test is, are you above or below 9,000 meters in 30 minutes? So that's 15 meters per stroke. So that's their test, whether they make the boat or not. And of course, they do it on sea levels, and then they do it in high altitude training. And of the whole British national team, only 4 have broken 9,000 meters on altitude. So this is a challenging test, but it shows you that even they focus on their own. I mean, that's the thing. So what we did is we marked not 500 meters because we have 2 natural buoys on our lake. We marked 750 meters, and we just say, okay, row it in the least amount of strokes. And you know, they all started with 70, 80, 90 strokes for the 750 meters. And now the record, the absolute record is 32, and that's on calm conditions, so there's no tailwind in here. So the record we have is 32 strokes for 750 meters. So in order to do that, I can tell you your balance is challenged because you have to get the blades off the water. And your core is challenged because it all starts with perfect posture at the finish. And, you know, 750 meters, 32 strokes, stroke rate 8, I would guess. My speed coach doesn't count that low. You'll be tired. I mean, you know, your body the next morning will tell you you did something you haven't done in a while. And so that was the first race ours ever did, was who can do 750 meters in the least strokes. Again, rowing the yoga link. Then we had 2, 3, 4 more sessions on the water. We did drills, we did a lot of things. And then we are fortunate that one of our rowers has a 12-year-old daughter who is a very gifted videographer. So then we had a video session with all the rowers. So we videoed every rower from all 4 perspectives, from the stern, from the bow, and from both sides. And then I spent a long weekend going through all the videos and basically completing this sheet for most of them. I mean, they didn't see the whole sheet, but they got the feedback on what they did really good and what they have to work on. And if you really force yourself to go through this list, that's a German. The German juniors, they have to do once a year, they have to do basically one of those formal test days. And after the day, their coach goes with them through this list and they get immediate feedback where they are. So if you go through them with this list, show them where they are doing really well and not, that really helps. And then of course, the next step is, if you are subscribing to Decent Rowing, for all these weaknesses here, there for sure is a video there with 1 or 2 drills that helps them work on that. That's what I did. So they all have their personal drills they know they have to do to work on. And then one thing that is really important. So we have lots of die-hard sweep rowers, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a sculling shell in a single. And nobody has ever told me that. So if you really video them, you always see them flopping at the catch. So you watch them and they see one blade is in, one is off. And you always wonder, what the hell are they doing? So you do a video and then you see that they all put out one knee to one side. Die-hard sweep rowers. They can't stop the reflex. So they do that in the single too. So here the left knee comes out. He tips to the left, the right blade comes up. Once he saw that, he immediately corrected it. He's still working on it, but it has improved a lot. But nobody ever told me that. So I'm glad we did the video. And it's a guy's problem and it's a sweep rower problem. Because you know, the guys have beer bellies, so they have an issue here anyway. And then they come forward, they of course cheat a bit, extra reach. And then the knee comes out because it's easier to get in the catch if one knee is out. So on the personalized drills, there are gazillion on Decent Rowing. What we had especially with the guys is not being able to set the boat at the finish and then come into the catch without wobbling the boat. And there is this one video I gave the link to. It's with John Dreesen, and he basically has a 20-minute video drills for scullers and why they are good. And one of them that is in there is you basically do a one finger roll up. So you sit at the finish, squared and buried, and then you only use one finger to tap down and come into the catch and put the blade in. And ours did this drill, they hated me for it, but you see it at their catches. It really helped. And the other thing is what they found out themselves is they sit at the finish and they bob. So they use this one finger and they tap down. So I think you Americans call it bobbing. So they do 7-10 bobs and then they come out in one fluid motion into the catch. That was the easiest. Once they started to do that, practically everybody could do this drill, and it really, really helped. And there are some other ones in that video, and it's really worthwhile. It's treasure chest or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of good drills in there. So we are 4 months into it. 4 months into it, they had their first race last Sunday. And this is what I learned in those 4 months. For big boat rowers, putting them into a single, the posture at the finish always determines the rest of the stroke. I mean, if they can't have good posture, engaged core, set boat, chin up, eyes up, relaxed shoulders, if they can't have a good posture at the finish, they basically don't need to take the next stroke because it will be a bad one. So we have been focusing a lot on this. Now we only have one dock. We actually by now are very fortunate that 10, 11, 12 people show up in to the practice. To launch 12 singles takes it time, so they go row about 600 meters. There is a calm place there after 600 meters, and they know that the first thing they have to do is to do their most hated drill. And some person in another call asked, what can we do without the speed coach? They do them facing each other. So if you have the sterns facing each other, they have to do this most hated drill, and it does 2 things. First of all, the most hated drill is the one you need to do the most. That's why you hate it so much. So by forcing them to do the most hated one, you force them to work on their weakness. And by making them face each other, you actually teach them to look up. And of course, it's more fun when you see other people struggling. Then if you have a lot of guys, the Italians, I mean, the person you saw on the 3rd slide, he has learned that the first half of every practice is feet out. So they row a lot of feet out. And it teaches the guys to control their power and teaches them finesse. And they can, ours now can do, and of course the Italians, so they can do everything feet out. They can do feet out starts, they can do high rates feet out, because if you can't do it with feet out, why would you be able to do it with feet in? Then they now understood that the next one is a really important one. I call it Australian Good Morning. I learned it from Andrew Randall, the guy who will be in the seminar in January. And he says, in Australia, it's called the roll up. In the US, it's called placement. So you sit at the finish, squared and buried, and you just tap down and come into the catch. Put the blade in, don't take a stroke. You do 10, 15 of those. And then you do 1 placement plus 1 stroke, and then placement plus 2 strokes, placement plus 3 strokes, up to placement plus 10. And the theory is that at stroke number 10, you should be at race pace. and race speed, or the other way around. You should be at race speed because you have to let the boat go fast, and then if you look down, you'll see that you're also at your race stroke rate. And it teaches rowers to listen to the boat, to find out, you know, how do I do the first strokes, when does it come up, when does it really start to work. So this is a really good one for them to work on. So that's the first thing in our practice after the drills is Australian good morning, sometimes feet in, sometimes feet out, but that's what they always do. And then, as I said, every practice there is a race. Backing race is the most fun one, but they are starting to get so good at it that it's not fun anymore. Then set distance with fewest strokes possible. It's an eye-opener for the guys that they can't force it. Guys' reaction is, you know, if I have to do the fewest stroke, I have to make them really strong. And it takes them a few practices to actually figure out, no, I don't have to have the strongest stroke. I have to have the most control stroke, easy catches, accelerating through the stroke, having a strong finish, and I start to nail this drill. But it takes the guys a while to figure that one out. Women, they have it from the beginning. And then we did a lot of capped stroke rate races. Of course, it's hard if people don't have speed coaches, so we invented something that is called the metronome drill. So you put your most efficient rower in stroke seat. So you put them furthest back and they set the stroke rate for the rest. And then you line up the other rowers in front of the metronome rower. And the rule is the people can only take a stroke when the stroke takes a stroke. Now, of course, if you put the most efficient rower you have in stroke seat, they will, because they have longer strokes, they have more run, they will start to gain on the people behind them. And the only way for the others to keep the metronome off is to actually improve their run and their efficiency of the stroke. And it's amazing to see how what characters actually can be metronomes and what characters prefer to be the rowers that have to keep the metronome away. For the metronome, if you have ambitious people, it's really, really hard because they have to be efficient without seeing the benefit of it. And they have to play around. So it works. And we have had some good results. And then, of course, we do a lot of handicapped start races so that they come to the finish line at the same time. So they always have a sprint to the finish line, which keeps them from falling apart. Because as a club, we have this plague, which is called the chaos fade. We always lead at 300-400 meters, and then we can always come in second or third because we don't have a strong second 500. So now I thought with the new people, we make sure that they know that it is whatever they start at, it's really important to finish fast. So that's what I always look at the pieces. And then the other thing you can do without the speed coach is steering. So we do lots of side-by-side pieces, and we do lined up starts, start sequence, feet out, the first few, then feet in, start plus 10, start plus 20, then start plus 50. And if they are side-by-side, they immediately learn whether they go straight or not. Because this is, you know, once they can actually row, going straight is really difficult. So that's what we teach on. And this star plus 50, you know, that's where we are right now, because then you have to transition from a start into a middle 500. And here they stroke, you see how the speeds come down, how they can't make this transition because they haven't learned to tap it along yet. Neither do I, by the way. but how to actually maintain boat speed without starting from zero at every stroke, that's the big challenge, and that's what they start to see when they do starts plus 50. Thank you, Nancy. So for the handicapped starts, this is this table where you can look what the good rower should achieve in speed and what is the difference between a 31-year-old woman and a 62-year-old guy. It's based on the FISA World Masters, and it shows you what are benchmarks for rowing, and it has one thing which is really good. It says, what splits should you be able to achieve at stroke rate 20 so that you have a chance at full race pace to then win the FISA World Masters. And we use this table for the handicapped starts. We use this table as a benchmark where people are. And the green marks is out of the 8 people we had starting our program in July, we have one woman who is 42 and some years old, and she nails this. She can do 20 strokes per minute for 5K at the 232. And for somebody who just started to be in the single in July, even though she rode for Ohio 20 years ago, it's actually pretty good. And we have one guy, 31 years old, who is here. We have one who is pushing it. He isn't there yet, but on a good day, he can do 1,000. Can't do 5 yet, but he is getting there. I finally made it there, thanks to yoga and focusing on the thing Nancy teaches. And this is our Harvard boy, and he is now at about 233. He isn't quite at 230, but he's getting close. And that to me is the big success. So he's diehard sweep rower. I mean, comes out of the Harvard 8, is convinced that if you don't have Harry Parker as a coach, you're not a real club. And we have been talking to him about, you know, that he is not setting the boat, that he is much heavier now than he used to be, and that he should practice in a single, and he refused to go in the single. Now COVID forced him to go into the single. When he joined our club 3 years ago, his best ERG score was 27 minutes. He just broke 20 minutes last week, or for this virtual head of the Charles, or one of them. And he can now almost row at 230. So he can now row what he ERG'd when he joined us. So he really took on to it. He hasn't called us a non-real club in a while. I mean, for him it worked. And just by going through this program, he's of course he's relentless. I mean, if he has set his mind to something, he will get there. So, I mean, that's the success. Now these are, of course, the alpha males and females who want to go there. We have some other rowers on the call today. They never wanted to race, so this chart is not relevant for them, but they too had a good time. And if you look at their catches now and their finishes now, I mean, they are different people. So the next challenge for us is winter is coming. We finally have the lake to ourselves. So to hold this 20 stroke per minute split for 16K, because there's a famous New Zealand coach who says the crew who can hold 80% of winning time at rate 20, for the elite it's 20K, we said it for master to 16K, will win every race there is to win. It is proven to work for juniors, it has proven to work for the elite. I mean, that's how everybody but the Americans trains. Whether it works for masters remains to be seen. We are working towards it. We have done 5K tests, we have done 8K But sometime in winter when the lake is to ourselves, we'll do a 16 and see how close we can get. So one of the questions was about steering and mirrors. So, I was bragging about the guy who can, meet these times, the 31-year-old. And this is one of his pieces going straight on the lake in a race situation, going through a bridge. And you see that he's at 2:15, 20 strokes per minute. I mean, he has wobbly bad strokes. You see that. That was a wake, and he can row that. Now he had to do his first race last Sunday. Same distance, 5,200 meters. You see how his rate come down. He could only row at 24, and his split came down substantially. Difference is, as you see with these blue lines down here, all of a sudden he wasn't at home anymore. He was on a unknown lake, unknown course, and I made sure that he had to row through the pack. So all the slow rowers were ahead of him, so he had to row through them. And he learned that he can't look on the drive. I told him, I mean, you can only maintain this pace if you look back on the drive. If you basically pause at the finish and look at the drive, you can't keep the rate up, the ropes will down, and you see here with these blue lines, he couldn't do it. So he came off the water and said, I want to learn how to row with a mirror. You read all those books. It says in a head race, if you have a mirror, you are a minute to 2 minutes faster on the same course than without the mirror. Now, the problem is, if you want to row with a mirror, and we have tried pretty much every mirror there is, the good ones are the ones that you can put on the brim of your head, because they are further away from your eye. So they are, about that far apart, at least that far away from your eye. You have to put it on your stronger side. And the trick, the people who can row with a mirror tell me, is that you always use your earlobe. So you always put them in a way that you see your earlobe in one of the edges, in the lower left edge of the mirror, so that you always know whether you're adjusted and really looking straight back or not. Now, if you want to row with a mirror, you have to have good posture, otherwise you will, feel from nausea. And especially at the finish, look at his head position, eyes up, head, shoulders down. He can row with a mirror. If you look down like I do, or if you have a wobble at the recovery because your head isn't proper, you cannot row with a mirror. And it's something, so they learned their lesson at the race. They came off the race, they say, okay, next goal is to learn how to row with a mirror. So next Sunday, they will get their mirrors, and we'll start to learn how to row with a mirror. It works, but you have to practice it. We got rammed at the head of the Charles by a double who bought their mirrors the day before the race. They had 2 mirrors in the boat, big mistake. They were starting to fight each other, whose mirror is right, and they didn't look at the course, they rammed us. So practice rowing with a mirror half a year or a year before you actually plan to use it. I'm a big fan of mirrors, but I can't use them because I'm still struggling with the posture. So that's one challenge we have to face for the winter, and the next one is now rhythm. So this is how this Australian good morning looks like. So you have them do the placement, so there's a lot of wobble here, and then placement +1, +2, +3, +4. And then once they do +5, the boat, the red is the speed. At 5, the boat starts to actually have some speed. Then, of course, they're inconsistent. So with 6, they don't get that far up. They are frustrated. So the next one, they do better. And then, so this is placement plus trend, placement plus 9, placement plus 8. So you see, if you only let them do 8, they can get up really high. But if they see 9 and 10, they start to get a bit tired and they can't reach their peak speed. So this chart is, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks old, so they now do better. But the thing we are now struggling with is this transition from this, because I mean, look at that. He does really good. I mean, that's the good morning. So that's, 10 meters on the first stroke, 100 meters on the last 10 strokes, times 5. So he should be at about 550, ideally, at this rate. And he's at 480 meters for this drill. It's pretty good. So, there's not much he can do here. So the next thing we have to teach him is now to stay up here, to stay at this speed for the rest of the race, even with a sprint towards the end. And that's called what I call rhythm. Other people call it the middle 500. And that's this seminar Jessica and I are putting together for January, where the experts, Olivia Coffey, stroke of 2 World Championship gold medals for the US in the quad and in the 8. She has this feeling how you do this transition, and then the biomechanist, one of the famous ones, Connie Draper, and then Andrew Randall. He coaches the Australian men's 8. So that's the men's 8 in Australia is their B boat. The 4 is their A boat. So he always gets the second choice of athletes and still wins medals at world championships and so on. So he has this down, how you get a team to transition, because he invented this Australian good morning, or at least that's whom I learned it from, how to transition out of this into race pace for the next 500 meters. And that's what the seminar will be about. So the conclusion, for us, it worked. We made them wet, no stigma. It's actually so bad that I start to be a bit afraid of the winter because they are not afraid of flipping anymore. And we had one flip 2 weeks ago in pretty windy, northeast windy conditions. So now temperature seems to become an issue. So the rule is we offer, our practice is always split in 2. We do 2 loops. The first loop is with a safety launch on the water. And the lesson we learned is somebody flips, we let them try once to get back into the boat. If they can't get back in the boat, or if it's windy and unpleasant conditions, we actually take them in the launch, including the boat. We have one of those Zodiac inflatables, so you can fit the rower into the boat, and it's easy to get the rower into the boat without the boat flipping. And then you put the boat and yours on the safety launch too, and then you drive them home. Make sure they get warm quickly. So take them the fear of flipping and live with the consequences, as I just said. But ours now flip and they can get back into the boat in a fluid, bow mount triggers in less than a minute. We have guys who can actually flip and get back in the boat so that nobody sees it. They are that fast. They're also not afraid of sitting at the catch, I can tell you that. Then the relax, and that's an exercise in every practice. Make them do the drill they hate the most. Do Nancy's tricks, do maneuvers. It really helps. And then focus them on the right thing and let them go fast. And they will have fun. So the die-hard sweep rowers, we have 4 of them. 2 of them already bought a single, and 2 of them are actually strongly looking at the price lists and the availabilities. So you can hook a sweep rower on this because they understood that it makes them better rowers, and they understood that it's fun when you can do something right and the boat immediately reacts. Because that's the one thing you never have in the 8. You never know how much you contribute to it. And in the single you do. And they started to love it. And they couldn't blame anybody else, but they are still competitive, so they can go against each other and so on. So to me, this theory that single rowing makes better sweep rowers, we did it the reverse way, and it still worked. I mean, they came out of the sweep boats and they are in the single and they still love it. So I'm surprised, to be honest. I mean, if you can convince a Harvard 8 guy that single rowing is actually fun and it helps him to make him better, it's pretty good. These presentations always end with shameless self-promotion. I do the same thing, but you can get it for free from us. So there's this yoga for rowers. Please join us. They're always day sponsors, so you can join for free. You can switch off the camera. Nobody sees you. And by now, Jessica has enough testimonials that the yoga teacher, her name is Laura Terry, is really good and knows what she's doing, and that she focuses on the right muscles and does it the right way. So that's one thing you can get free from us. Please join. And the other thing you can get free from us is these charting tools we use to see the performance of our rowers. The one NK provides is terrible. So we built one for ourselves. It works for all fit files. So whether you have a Garmin or whether you have a Speed Coach or whether you have a Cox Orb or whether you have one of the other ones, you can always use this to chart. There are rulers up here, so you can select which part of the outing you want to look at. A resolution is stroke by stroke, so you can actually look at every stroke. You can see stroke rate, speed, heart rate, and you can see where you are. And the latest thing we just did is, of course, big boys, big toys. We have people who have those Empower Orlocks. It's fun to have them, but how to interpret the data? Again, no help from NK. So we developed this chart. So the orange line down here is the catch angle. So you have your speed, you have your stroke rate, and for every stroke you see the catch angle, that's the orange line. And this turquoise line is the finish. And then you see the slip, means the difference between the catch till you actually have power on the blade. So that's this orange line here, and the same thing at the finish. How much wash do you have at the finish related to the speed of the boat and the stroke rate? So this is Tim, is the fastest guy we had last year. He rode the fastest over 50 single sculler time at last year's Head of the Hooch. This is that race. And you see amazing that he gets longer when he brings the rate up to the end. So he has a better catch angle. He has less slip. He has basically no wash, but still a long finish, even at the higher rate. And we developed this because otherwise I can tell you, looking at this Empower data, you spend a lot of time for seeing not much. So this is new. We just developed this brand new. So if you have Empower Orlog files, send them to me. We'll look at it. We'll also give you access to the charting tool so that you can chart your own things and look at this, how you do. And you see, I mean, Nancy already took notes. So he has to adjust his footboard. He has to move his feet into the stern because the catch angle is too short. And he has a wash problem when he starts to get sloppy. Look at this white here. But he will work on that, and moving the feet will help him, because then he won't have this wash. I'm sloppy. I just bring the oars into the body without having pressure on it. It will be a bit more difficult for him. So, yeah. Thanks for being patient. That was it. That's all I have.
Cool. So I guess we have, our numbers are such that I would just welcome everybody to unmute. And if you have a question, there is definitely one that showed up. Nancy, if you want to ask it, or I can ask it for you.
Oh, sure, I'm happy to ask. Hi, Felix. We're doing both coastal, but we'll probably do sculls too. And one of the things we've always been trying to figure out is the PFD question. Do you have a contact for the German PFD provider?
Yes, it's called Secumar, SUSECUMAR, and it's their blah 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 100, and I will send you the link.
That'd be great.
They are hard to get in the US because there's only one importer in Florida, and this company normally does safety equipment for oil platforms. So this is kind of a side product. So to convince this importer to import them in the US is pretty tough. But since you are in Western Australia, you know, you might have an importer pretty close, because they do safety equipment for oil, I mean for the mining industry, basically. Yes. So you might get.
Thank you. Yeah.
You might be lucky.
Yeah, and by the way, I loved your graph using the Empower data. I'm hoping Phil, who's probably watching, is going to connect up with you and give it a go, because we actually use Excel to spread out all that data, but having it all in one place is just kind of nifty. I haven't seen it before.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Felix. That was a fantastic talk, and I look forward to being able to get hold of the way you've presented the data. It's fabulous with the slip and the wash incorporated. Thanks very much. That's great.
And it's, you know, so the problem with the NK one is that if you go from the Empower Orlog to the Speak Coach, they only transfer 3 data points, and then they interpolate everything in between. Even so, they would have more data points to actually make it better. So their data is basically hocus pocus. There is another manufacturer, Active Tools, coming out with a competitive product, and we actually developed this chart for them, and they will put it in the public domain, and everybody can use it, whether you have an Empower Orlog or one of theirs, and they have more data points. So their data is less math and more measuring. And they also have a different trigger point, what they consider as slip and wash. You know, because basically, when do they consider that you don't have pressure on the blade anymore, and when do they consider that you actually have pressure on the Orlog? Whether you like that for the Empower or not, that debates to be seen. But Connie Draper in January, she uses this Peach system, and she has taught me a lot about that. You know, this looks good, but whether it's relevant remains to be seen, because there might be a systematic measuring error in the whole thing. So that's why I want to see a lot of data. So if you can send me a lot of data, I can look at it, because she then has the Peach data. When we'll discuss that in January, I'm sure she will show you something similar.
Felix, I have a question about, I use CrewNerd on my iPhone. Would it have the data that you could, that we could review or assess?
Can you export a CSV file or a FIT file? If you can export one of those.
File. I think I'll have to fiddle with it, but I think I can do a CSV file.
if you send it to me, we will try to do an import routine for it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Because, yeah.
Cool.
So I talked too long. Everybody left.
Well, I just have a
That
couple.
was perfect. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions or comments that you want to make? I just want to do a shout out. One, I put it in the text, but in the chat, but making sure that people knew about Nancy's book, since it's referenced so much tonight as well, and it's Master Sculling Technique and Training. And Nancy, can you get it in hardcover now from Amazon, or is it?
You can get it in hard copy, but you've got to get it from the UK. You've got to order it from Amazon or Booktopia, Book Depository. But it's supposed to be out in the US early next year. I think you can get the Kindle version in the US.
Yes.
Yeah. So sorry, you have to go to the UK for that at the moment. Coming soon.
Sounds good. And then the other shout out I wanted to do is for Laura Terry, her yoga that she teaches. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen the links because I keep pushing them out for her yoga classes on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock Eastern time and 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and other times you can figure it out from there. But I wanted to let people know that I just talked to Chris Chase this morning, and he's going to go ahead and she'll be on for maybe, she said she'll probably do 2 or 3 sessions before the main sessions start for the US Rowing conference that's coming up here in December. So just again, if I think a bunch of folks here tonight have done our yoga classes, and they're pretty good. So I'd highly recommend experiencing at least one of them. Yeah. Okay. Well, any other questions or comments? Or you're getting a lot of thank yous, Felix. Very informative, and anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I posted again in the chat. You know, if you'd like, if I don't have your email and you'd like me to send you a copy of the recording and or the copy of the PDF version of his chat with all the live links, go ahead and email me, and my email's in the chat, and I'll send it to you in the next couple days.
Great.
Yeah.
Super. Thanks, Jess. Thanks for doing it. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you for your patience. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Sorry it took so long.
No,
I'm passionate about it.